About 4 years ago, in early 2009, some of the owners of Derby Walker House approached the Bay Area Community Land Trust with concerns about this building and a proposal to donate the building to the Land Trust. The building was still owned by 14 owners who had purchased the building collectively in 1971, but most of those owners had long ago moved out of the house, some had moved out of state, and a few had passed away. 2 of the grown children of the owners were still living in the building, and the mortgage had been paid off. However, the building needed a lot of repairs, and the property insurance had lapsed, and it was unclear who, if anyone, was actually managing the property. And because the owners had bought the building to provide affordable housing for families in the neighborhood, they wanted some way to ensure that the housing would remain affordable even after they were gone. We had seen a lot of similar properties that started out with good intentions, but many years later, when the original owners moved out, the property was lost, or some of the heirs of the owners decided to sell the property for a big profit. And the owners of Derby Walker wanted the housing to remain affordable to lower-income people. So all of the owners decided to donate the property to the Bay Area Community Land Trust to be developed into a limited equity housing cooperative that would be owned and managed by the residents. The Land Trust began working with the residents in 2009, providing trainings and technical assistance to help them take over ownership of the property. However, just as the property was about to be transferred, a legal dispute developed with one of the heirs of one of the owners. As a result, it took nearly 3 years of efforts to clear the title so that the property could be donated to the Land Trust. In December 2012, when the legal issues were resolved, we continued working with the residents to help them write their bylaws and other legal documents, learn property management skills, and form their board of directors to take over ownership. Because the property needed so much rehab, we were able to secure a private loan to pay for the construction, which is now underway to bring the building up to standard. The title was transferred to the residents in October 2013, and they are now a resident-owned and controlled limited equity housing cooperative. The co-op will continue to have a ground lease with Bay Area Community Land Trust so we can provide technical assistance and oversight in the coming years.
Thank you for joining us today to celebrate the creation of the first new limited equity housing cooperative in Berkeley in 18 years.
It was a great place for children to grow up. It was the most wonderful neighborhood and the most wonderful community spirit that I've really ever experienced. My name's Mary Barnes, and I lived in the Derby Walker house for 11 years. My ex-husband and I moved in 1969. I was pregnant with my first son, and immediately we became involved with neighbors. It was a very neighborly place, but it became more so as time went on. When we first lived there, we lived as tenants, and the landlord lived in San Jose. There was already a movement afoot to try to keep absentee landlords out of the neighborhood and to keep the rents affordable. About a year after we had moved in, maybe a year and a half, the house was put up for sale by the absentee landlord in San Jose. And the idea was floated that perhaps we could get together and buy the place. The cost was $40,000 for a 3-unit house at the corner of Derby and Walker Streets in Berkeley. But still, most of us were very low income. None of us would have been able to buy the house on our own. And we wanted it to be a house that was bought and shared by the people in the community. People in the neighborhood all chipped in between $200 and $500 for the down payment on that house. There was tremendous support for what we didn't call at the time cooperative housing, but that's certainly what we meant by it. We shared childcare. We exchanged tools. We had a volleyball team. We competed in the down at Live Oak Park with our Walker Street volleyball team. We actually published a newsletter. We printed it ourselves, and it was called The Daily Walker. We had numerous activities. We used to have cooperative shopping. We had many potlucks. We used to have Sunday brunches that rotated around at different people's houses. Every 4th of July, which happened to be Gail Brown's birthday, we had a big block party. And when I say block party, we pulled out all the stops. I mean, we had races, we had dancing in the street, we had fireworks, we had a huge potluck, we had singing. It was really a golden age. Well, I live in the 9th Street Co-op and have been to some meetings of the Bay Area Community Land Trust and was very interested in their effort to convert properties to co-ops. And I thought, well, why not that property, which was, in fact, that was the idea of it from the beginning. I mean, I'm also a union person. I've just retired this past April for 35 years in the nurses union, which is has become a really progressive union. But there are constant cutbacks at every level in nursing. Do more with less. It's also so profit driven, and people who are day laborers, people who are unloading trucks, people who are doing seasonal labor, people who are working in hotels, how are they supposed to afford housing? Not to mention the fact that even union employees who once had very good jobs are up against it in terms of affording houses. I don't know much about economics. I love listening to Richard Wolff, but I can't believe that the whole house of cards isn't going to collapse at some point. But what will stand are the kind of housing and communities that cooperatives build. Seeing the Derby Walker House going from being a rental properties and surrounded by a lot of conflict, moving to becoming a cooperative, it's just extremely gratifying. And, the kind of cooperation and community I experienced there were a real gift to my life.
We wanted to make it official and legal because the title, as Rick mentioned, was very murky. We kind of found that all the idealism of the 1970s was clouded by people seeing an opportunity to cash in, and thankfully we were able to persevere and get full title of the house and make a donation to the land trust. And I'm so glad that the house is finally legally and forever what it was always meant to be since it was purchased in the 70s. So I'm just glad to be a part of that.
Well, I'm just thrilled to be here because we are now completing one more limited equity housing co-op. And the notion of limited equity means that in perpetuity, this housing gets passed on from family to family who could otherwise not afford to live in Berkeley, actually, even anymore, because it's gotten so expensive here. But this is very permanent. And it also fosters this sense of doing it together, which is a very strong sense of social bonding, which is really quite important. It wouldn't have happened without the dedication of a lot of people who were involved, but I have to call out Rick Lewis, who has lived and breathed equity co-op since we did our first conversion, which was in 1986. And now people can live in a lovely apartment with other people for a very, very, very affordable rent and manage it themselves. And so the most important thing is that it's permanent and it's in the control of the residents. And I want to say a little bit about why that's important. The city of Berkeley is involved in recently 3 efforts One is the 2020 vision, which is designed to help all students succeed in school. The second is our violence prevention effort, where we're gathering the school district and other segments of the community together to actually stipulate and create a plan to make a difference and bring the rate of violence down. And starting early on with. And the third is to address health disparities, because there are definitely health disparities, differences depending on your socioeconomic class and your racial sector. And in every case, when we study those, it comes back to success being tied to affordable, permanent, decent housing for those families. It's a key ingredient to being successful in school, to having better health, and to rear a family in a community that just simply has less violence in it. More mediation, more commitment to the community. So this might seem like a small co-op, but I don't look at it that way. It's actually a major step forward in creating something permanent and affordable and in control of the residents for all the reasons that I said. And once again, I want to recognize Rick's role in keeping the flame going. And I know that he'll continue to do that work. So thank you, Rick.
I hope this is just one additional step. I know that we're funding this program currently, and I'm sure that all of the city council members are going to want to keep this funding going and try to expand it so that we can provide the technical and financial assistance to empower additional hundreds and hundreds and hopefully thousands of people to live in limited equity co-ops throughout the city. So thank you for your wonderful leadership.
People who spearheaded this were Doug and Gail Brown, who are our next door neighbors. And I see people who really give their whole lives to this. I mean, people like Rick Lewis, that's his life. That's not his activity or his job, it's his life. And I think for housing, cooperative housing to become established, we're going to have some people who are willing to push it beyond their own particular living situation so that other co-ops can form. It's a lot of work, and it's a rewarding work.